one last topic today, and I'm practically out of time. I have very little time, and I'm probably going to have to come back to it next week. But there's the rumblings of the beginning of a protest in Texas. There have been protests over in Texas over how long the shutdown is lasting. I'll get to that in a moment, and over contact tracing. To be clear on the shutdown, our Governor Abbott, is getting a lot of kudos from other places around the country because Texas is opening up faster than, Democrat-held states under Democrat control. Texas is opening up faster. It's still really slow. It's still really slow in Texas. I mean, it's a little better. We have stores can have whatever the rule was and all sorts of arcane, idiotic rules, 25%, but only this and only that, and distancing and masks. And as the coronavirus, it is beginning to dissipate, and everyone around the world is seeing this. In fact, in Milan, there's a doctor in Milan who is one of the doctors treating all this who's saying it's pretty much gone. But in America, even though you see headlines that the leftists try to push saying, oh, new cases, the coronavirus crisis wasn't the crisis the left tried to create, wasn't the crisis Neil Ferguson tried to create. And so America's moving past it. We still are at a rate of infection that is consistent with a bad flu year, and the rate of death similar to that. We do not have overrun hospitals anywhere in the country any longer. We did in the really hot spot of New York City, and I guess in New Orleans and maybe Chicago. We're past all of those. We're at the point that they're laying off doctors and nurses in hospital systems around this country. So that's where we are, and people are saying, look, the disease wasn't as bad as you thought. We're getting past it. We're heading into the warm summer. Stop all this shutdown. So the quick thing I'll tell you was the great thing that happened in Texas. First of all, and I'm going to try to get this guy on the show. I haven't met him before, but he's a Texas state rep. His name is Tony Tinderholt, and he wrote a letter to Governor Abbott. It's called "It's Time for an About Face." Brilliant facts in the letter, basically saying there's absolutely no justification for the continued shutdown of Texas. No justification for all the limits. Bowling alleys can open, but only at 25% capacity. This business can open, but only this, only that. This letter this guy wrote is on our website, americacanwetalk.org. This is a letter that should be sent to every Republican and every Democrat governor in this country. And he makes the point in here, we are causing Texas, the leader of liberty in the nation, the state that stands up and always says, we're the leader in liberty. It's causing Texas to be a foothold for socialism, for government-controlled society, government-controlled business. It's a really eloquent letter, a really good letter, step by step, pointing out to Governor Abbott, number one, you're pushing the great state of Texas towards socialism. And number two, the contact tracing is completely ridiculous. He also makes a point in here, and I made the point many times, I'll make it again, wrapping up today's show, but there is no science. There is no science behind all of this phased opening up, phased this business can open, but only at 10%. This business only 25%. There's no science, there's no data, there are no facts. There's just simply the government using control because it has the ability to do that. So and why I say it's a big pushback in Texas is we have a Republican governor here. We have a Republican majority in the Texas House and the Texas Senate. So usually, as both parties do, they solve their differences behind the scenes. They do not have public battles. Democrats do this just as much as Republicans. You don't want to have a public battle, elected representatives standing up against the governor, but obviously Tony Tinderholt sent this to Governor Abbott because otherwise he could not get the governor to listen. In Texas, we're having great pushback against the just irrationally, not tethered to facts or reason, reintroduction, slow reopening of Texas. And so this is a great thing. Public letter. You ought to adapt it to your state, urge your state representatives and state senators to send it to your governor. The people have to push back against this astonishing shutdown of freedom in America. The other thing that happened in Texas on a broader scale, and then I'll get to this other story next week, but there was also actually within the Texas legislature, as there are many places, there's a Freedom Caucus that is the most conservative members of the legislature. And the Freedom Caucus itself put out a statement calling for our governor to end the contract, sever the contract with the contact tracing group in place that is supposed to begin working in Texas. It was passed and in many ways offensive to many people. Again, unjustified by science. And you want to talk about Orwellian living in a surveillance state. When I talk with you next week about what's really involved in contact tracing, you realize this is a component, an element of surveillance we should never get started in this country. And in Texas, again, elected Republicans openly standing up against the elected Republican governor saying, this must end. You cannot do this. You've got to get rid of this. So I'm very, very proud of Tony Tinderholt, other Republicans, the Texas Freedom Caucus, and others saying, we're just not going to have this in the state. We're not going to do it. I'll tell you, we're going to have a special deep dive next week on contact tracing.